Avernus is the topmost layer of the 9 hells. This is the first place most visitors arrive at when traveling to Baator. When the demons are winning the blood war and have pushed back the devils to their home turf, this is where the battles are fought. You are very likely to see legions of devils marching to war, doing combat drills, or awaiting orders. Avernus is a rocky wasteland. It has a starless dark red sky, and fireballs will randomly explode on travelers of this plane. First and second edition explains that this is because the atmosphere is filled with flammable vapor gathered into innumerable glowing spheres that radiate a dim light. These vapors will randomly explode into a fireball, working the same as the fireball spell, except it can't be controlled or dispelled. In first edition, there's a 1 in 6 chance per minute to explode, or 1 in 12 chance per minute if the travelers carry no open flames. In second edition, there's a 5% chance per hour that it explodes. In third edition, the fireballs streaking across the sky are caused by Zariel's anger of being imprisoned, and spitefully seek out victims that are in motion. So mechanically, while in combat, and only in combat, there's a 5% chance per round to explode on a random combatant, according to the Fiendish Codex 2. However, in Manual of the Planes for 3rd edition, it is a 10% chance per day to get hit by a fireball, whether you're in combat or not. In 4th edition, once a creature is bloodied, which means they're at half HP, fireballs will begin striking every round until no creature is bloodied. 5th edition makes no mention of fireballs, but does say that meteors occasionally fall from the sky and leave fuming impact craters behind. 2nd edition goes into further detail on describing the lair, stating that the wastelands of Avernus are scattered with rocks of obsidian and quartz. Mountains dot the blood-dusty plain, and foothills march across the land like the overturned tracks of some gargantuan, unknown beast. The rocks and boulders present danger for those traveling faster than a brisk walk, and must make dex checks every minute or fall and take 1d3 damage. The entire lair is suffused with blood-red light that never wavers or dims. Blood is the leitmotif of Avernus. The lake of blood spills from the Stigmaris Mountains into the River of Blood, and thence through a series of streams and gulches into the river Styx. Some say every river, lake, stream, etc. is the blood of Avernus's victims. 3rd edition continues the blood theme, stating that pools and rivers run thick with blood from millions of battles that have been fought here throughout the Blood War. The entire layer is coated in blood and viscera. The lump under your foot could be a rock, or it could be a stray bit of bone or horn ripped from the body of a devil or demon. 5th edition also describes the layer as running with rivers of blood, but 4th edition instead says the layer flows with rivers of lava. The reason Avernus is such a desolate wasteland is because of the Blood War. Avernus, being the first layer of the 9 hells, is the first place demons arrive when besieging Baator. This is where millions of battles are fought and has left the place a ruined mess. In 5th edition, it is explained that Avernus used to be a plain of lush gardens and bucolic beauty created by Asmodeus to tempt mortals, a paradise of infinite delights designed to lure and enrapture mortals. It wasn't until the endless waves of slavering demons destroyed all this and turned Avernus into the battle-strewn layer of bones, ruins, and scattered war machines that it is today. Fleeting reminders of this ancient paradise can occasionally manifest. Sometimes you might glimpse a fantastic mirage of a grand palace that disappears when you get near, or hear beautiful music for just a few moments. The Rulers of Avernus. Every layer of hell has a lord, or archduke, that rules over the entire layer. Avernus has had several throughout the different editions, and the history of these power shifts is, well, like a lot of things in D&D, confusing and riddled with contradictions and retcons. So, let's get into it. In 1st edition, Avernus was ruled by Tiamat. In 2nd edition, it's ruled by Bel, and it says that Bel overthrew the previous ruler, who was Zariel. So the previous ruler is Zariel, but in 1st edition it was Tiamat. 2nd edition points out that Zariel was the original ruler of Avernus, and nowhere in any 2nd edition book does it mention Tiamat being the previous ruler of Avernus. So I'm thinking that they just retconned Tiamat out of ruling Avernus. It also says that when Bel overthrew Zariel, he kept her imprisoned in the Bronze Citadel and tortured her, slicing off bits of flesh and eating it. But then in 5th edition, in the Rise of Tiamat module, it says that Zariel was at the mercy of Tiamat Tiamat, not Bel, so that's another retcon. At least 5th edition is consistent with the lore that Zariel ruled in the past and then was overthrown by Bel. This is evident in both the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Rise of Tiamat module. However, when the module Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus was released, it retconned all of that, saying that Zariel hadn't been the ruler in the past, that she wasn't even a devil until a little over a century ago, and has remained in power since, never being overthrown by Bel. Another interesting note, no edition except for 1st edition makes any mention of Tiamat having ruled Avernus at any point in time. However, a post on Candlekeep Forum by Ed Greenwood in 2015 does confirm that she had ruled Avernus at some point, and was demoted because, quote, she was so ineffective in preventing the various outcast devils there from repeatedly attempting coups that threatened the dominion of Asmodeus, end quote. So, the history of rulership over the first layer of hell is riddled with contradictions and retcons, like many things in the lore of Dungeons & Dragons. But hey, that's what I'm here for, to give you every version of events so that you can choose which one you like the most. Now, let's talk about the individual rulers of Avernus. Tiamat. Now, there's a ton of lore on Tiamat in general, but not much lore on how she was a ruler of Avernus. Ed Greenwood said that she was relinquished of the position of Lord of the First since she was so bad at her job, but Asmodeus knew that it wasn't intentional on her part, so he chose not to punish her and let her be his champion, guarding the gate to Dis. He then covertly told her to provide magical aid to Zariel to ensure Bel doesn't gain too much power and become a problem, since Bel was eating bits of her flesh and gaining power from her. When Tiamat went to do that, Bel magically dominated her because he had been forewarned by Asmodeus to imprison Tiamat in her kingdom in the 9 hells so that she doesn't get above herself and kindle personal ambitions. This enraged Tiamat and led to her trying to find a way out of her cage, leading to the events of the 5th edition module Tyranny of Dragons. There's a ton of more lore on Tiamat, so if you want more, you should check out Mr. Rex's video on her that's nearly an hour long. It's amazing, but I'm just giving you the gist of her history as Lord of Avernus and the politics within Hell. Bel. Bel is probably the most famous success story in all of Beator. He assassinated a pit fiend general and took his place working directly under the Dark Eight. There he had massive success against the Tanari, one time even gaining their trust by turning against his own devils in the middle of a battle, and continued to march along with them against the Batazu. He reveals to them Batazu plans and agrees to double-cross the devils again, returning to Beator, pretending to rejoin his fellows, and then betray them again on the battlefield. He does this, but secretly gives the devils the demons' battle plans. When next the forces of Beator engage those of the Abyss, Bel rides with the Batazu, but switches sides again in the middle of fighting, just as he promised the demons. He then fights alongside the demons for a year and a day, and then leads them into a long-range Batazu ambush, crippling the Tanari for a decade, reducing them to defensively fighting from the Abyss. Bel is awarded for this elaborate double cross with command of the armies of Avernus. He serves Zariel as her loyal right hand for centuries, and then eventually orchestrates a coup, taking out Zariel and imprisoning her. Then he prepared to repel the assault Asmodeus and the other lords would lead, since Hell is a lawful plane and taking control by force is typically against their laws. But no forces came. Instead, Asmodeus sent his constable Martinet, who congratulated Bel on his coup, and said that Asmodeus had decided not to make him burn in the pit of flame for eternity, and support Bel as lord, as long as he continued to fulfill his obligations as a general to the Dark Eight. You see, Asmodeus wasn't a huge fan of Zariel at the time, always trying to scheme to take his position, just like every other Archduke, and Bel had no Archdevil allies, feeling a meager pit fiend wasn't worthy of the title of Archduke. Normally, pit fiends can be promoted to an Archdevil, taking on a unique form, only then can they be promoted to Archduke. But since Bel took the throne by force, he remained in his pit fiend form, the only Archduke that was not a unique devil. By forcing Bel to still focus on his duties fighting in the Blood War, in addition to governing Avernus, that left him with little time to scheme against other nobles. In one fell swoop, Asmodeus had replaced a quarrelsome and conniving lord with a harried pit fiend with little support among the nobility. In 5th edition, Bel was demoted to Duke and replaced with Zariel. There's 2 different versions of the story as mentioned previously, but in both versions, there's no reason given as to why Asmodeus wanted to demote Bel. Zariel. Zariel is a fallen angel according to the Descent into Avernus origin story, and has only been a devil for a little over a century. In 2nd edition, she is described as being the first Lord of the First, presumably created when a drop of Asmodeus' blood landed in Beator, meaning she has been a devil her entire existence. Because she is never an Archduke in 1st through 4th edition, and is being held prisoner that entire time, there's not much mention of her personality in those editions. 5th edition, however, does give some insight into her personality. Zariel the Angel fell because she was obsessed with the Blood War and wanted to rid the multiverse of all fiends by bringing the fight to Beator. She was defeated and imprisoned. By swearing fealty to Asmodeus, Zariel could bring her rage against the demons and continue the fight in the Blood War, with legions of devils under her command. The strategies of devils shifted dramatically when she took over. Her fiery temperament and reckless maneuvering contrast starkly to Bel's expertise in logistics and military tactics. Bel intentionally does nothing to discourage her battle plans, in hopes that she overextends her forces and faces a defeat that will result in her demotion. Zariel lives to fight, and bases her assessment of individuals on their fighting prowess and usefulness in combat. She is no politician. The Dukes of Avernus. Every Archduke of Hell has dukes that serve directly underneath them. In 1st edition, while Tiamat ruled, her dukes consisted of Amducius, who was in charge of 29 companies of Abishai, Malphus, who was in charge of 40 companies of Abishai, and Gope, who was in charge of 3 companies of Orenyes. In 2nd edition, while Bel was in charge, he had the same 3 dukes that Tiamat had. In 5th edition, while Zariel is in charge, Bel is one of her dukes after being demoted from Archduke, and he is in charge of a forge, manufacturing weapons for the armies of Hell. In 3rd edition, strangely, it says that Avernus has no dukes. Now, there are more than the 4 dukes I've mentioned in Avernus. Presumably, each lord would have a lot of dukes that go unnamed, and there are plenty of other ones that have been named, just not in major source books, but instead scattered throughout articles of Dragon magazine, and I'm not going to list all of them. Inhabitants. Although Avernus is the forefront of the Blood War, and thus legions of every type of devil will be stationed here, the most common Batazu you will find in Avernus are Lemures, Nuparibos, Imps, Orenyes, Abishai, and Spinagons. In addition to devils, you can also find dragons, goblins, and kobolds. Avernus is big. Some editions say it's infinite. So although the Lord of the First technically controls all of it, and countless legions of devils are stationed here ready for war, there is still huge swaths of the wasteland that cannot be controlled and monitored. Within these sections are outcast devils. Devils that were exiled, ran away to escape punishment, or simply wished to leave the infernal hierarchy and do their own thing. Many of these were dukes or archdevils that were exiled to Avernus specifically by Asmodeus. In the 5th edition module Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, some of these outcasts are just regular devils, not archdevils, that form war bands that roam around the Avernian wasteland riding Mad Max-style war machines, and many of these warlords aren't even devils, but are mortals from other planes as well. Although those specific details are from 5th edition, the concept of rogue devils roaming the lawless chunks of Avernus has been in the lore since 1st edition. Moloch, who was an archduke in 1st edition, got exiled and could be found roaming Avernus in multiple editions after that. However, in 5th edition, they changed it so that whenever he's in Hell, he gets demoted to an imp, and thus is only at full power when residing outside of Hell. Now let's move on to the various locations you can find within the first layer of Hell. The Bronze Citadel is the seat of power of Avernus. Since Avernus would be the beachhead to any Tanari invasion, when Bel was in power, he was constantly adding new walls and fortifications to the Bronze Citadel. It now spans hundreds of square miles of territory and features 12 concentric rings of walls, each bristling with war machines. In the center of these massive fortifications lies the original Bronze Citadel. While Bel ruled, each member of the Dark Eight maintained a household within the Citadel so they could confer with Bel about the Blood War. 5th edition makes no mention of the Bronze Citadel, and instead Zariel rules from a 450-foot tall, flying basalt citadel that is shaped like a sword blade and fueled by souls extracted directly from the river Styx. However, this flying fortress is not unique to just her. She has many of them that she uses to defend Avernus with. Considering this is just another, albeit large and advanced, war machine for the Blood War, I would assume she would still need a stationary place of rulership. I like to think the Bronze Citadel still exists, but who knows? Wizards of the Coast might have retconned that out just like so many other cool things in 5th edition. Tiamat's Lair. It is blocked by the Maggot Pit in 2nd and 3rd edition, and it is near the Pillar of Skulls. This giant cave is home to Tiamat, queen of evil dragonkind. She is attended by her 5 dragon consorts, male great worms of each chromatic color. According to most sources, her lair guards the only entrance to Dis, or at least the most well-known and accessible entrance. It is also always guarded by dragons, dragon petitioners, and an army of Abishai. In 3rd edition, it is described as a jagged, crown-shaped mountain redoubt with 5 watchtowers, each carved to resemble a dragon head that curve out from the structure. It still maintains the cave entrance on the other side of the Maggot Pit, like in 2nd edition, but its main entrance is a hole in the roof only flying creatures can get in. In 5th edition, there really isn't much information on what her lair is like. All we get is that in Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, page 112, there's a monument dedicated to her right outside the entrance, a colossal dragon skull leaning up against the mountainside. Abishai of all colors nest in sulfurous caves, and scores of white Abishai will swarm out to attack anyone who assaults her lair. In the Rise of Tiamat module, we get a description of Tiamat's temple, which is located within her lair, but it isn't the lair in its entirety. It is a 5-pointed temple dedicated to her worship, apparently empty and filled with nothing, just a wide open space to praise her in. Draukari. Draukari is the divine realm of Kurtlemak, the god of kobolds. In 2nd edition, we get the following descriptions. Its entrance is located in a small cave near the Pillar of Skulls, where you must travel down thousands of feet. It is a sprawling mess of tiny, winding tunnels that is easy to get lost in, requiring an intelligence check every hour to not become lost. Once lost, there is a 10% chance per hour to regain familiar ground. Traveling the tunnels isn't restricting, as long as you're 3 feet tall. Otherwise, you must squeeze, and it becomes rather difficult and dangerous. Life in Draukari is nasty, brutish, and short, and the place is filled with hateful kobold petitioners. They will gladly kill gnomes whenever they can, even leaving Beator to do so. They sell valuable gems to the highest bidder, although devils can afford a lot, so these prices tend to be exorbitant. Draukari has 3 cities that are really just big warrens. Nibelin, with a population of 40,000, Frexstavik, with a population of 30,000, and Schnjarl, with a population of 5,000. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing those right, I'm doing my best, guys. 3rd edition describes Draukari as being so overpopulated, it's practically bursting with kobolds, and occasionally there are so many that they break out into a civil war that culls the weakest of the fiends and gives the strongest some momentary breathing room. Blood seeps from the surface above and drops onto the inhabitants, covering their skins completely, acting as a lubricant that allows them to wiggle through the mass of fellow fiends more effectively. The Peaceable Lands. This is the divine realm of Bargraviek, the goblinoid deity of unity and cooperation, titled Peacekeeper for his role of encouraging teamwork between the various goblinoid races and tribes. However, he was also a god of territory, and his peacekeeping role did not extend to creating positive relations between goblinoids and other races. Just like his title, his domain's name of the Peaceable Lands was also misleading, for it was where goblin legions went through regimens of harsh training in calisthenics. The only information I could find on this place is 3 sentences on page 132 of On Hallowed Ground, so I don't know where in Avernus it is or what it looks like. The Maggot Pit. The Maggot Pit blocks access to Tiamat's lair. It is a huge crater easily 1,000 feet across, filled with ooze and writhing maggots. It is from this primordial soup that writhing lemures and nupperibos spawn. In 3rd edition, tortured soul shells were thrown in and eaten by the maggots, and their remains transformed into lemures. 5th edition makes no mention of the Maggot Pit, and instead lemures are spawned from the river Styx. The Pillar of Skulls. The Pillar of Skulls is a landmark that is near the entrance to Tiamat's lair and the entrance to Draukari. In 2nd edition, the pillar is composed of living, disembodied heads of mostly human or humanoid races. They are squashed together to form a solid mass at least 10 feet round and 20 feet tall. They are constantly talking, cursing, and arguing with one another, and you'll hear the tower before you see it. In 3rd edition, the pillar rises more than a mile high, and it is made entirely out of demon skulls, representing trophies of the Blood War. Darkspine. Darkspine used to be one of the gate towns of the Outlands, but the devils conquered it and it was pulled into Beator, making Ribcage the new gate town. This process has been done many times, and other abandoned gate towns dot the landscape of Avernus between Darkspine and the river Styx. Most of the original inhabitants of Darkspine fled or were slain, and little remains of the town. The few remaining survivors scour the rubble of the burned town for whatever valuables they can find and fight viciously over them. The one who ruled the town when it still remained in the Outlands is Alfredo Mazalik, who still rules it now as part of the agreement he made with the Batazu in exchange for helping them bring Darkspine into Beator. He feels they didn't honor the rest of the deal, so he is a shattered man now, doing nothing to rule and sitting alone in the Great Hall, brooding about his lost plans. Abishai wandered Darkspine looking for interlopers so they can ask them to swear fealty to Bel. Those who don't are taken and either never come back or returned blasted in body and spirit with the sigil of Bel branded on them. The town has quite a few traders who set up shop here, using it to store their wares when traveling Beator and selling gear to help survive the lower planes when they are in town. They accept gold and gems as payment if they are going back to the Outlands, and they accept services and souls as payment when going deeper into Beator. Rumors have it that a small resistance is forming in Darkspine. That information is from 2nd edition. In 3rd edition, it only says that it boasts one tavern known as the Pig and Boke, and the barkeep, a harvester devil named Jebelim, will serve unwary customers. She will attempt to get them to sign a Faustian pact, and if she can't, will report on their apparent capabilities with one of the Dark Eight. It makes no mention of any others living within Darkspine. The river Styx. You probably already know about the river Styx. It flows through the top layer of all of the lower planes, and non-fiends who fall in it lose their memories. One fun fact about it is that it used to be the edge of Avernus, marking the border of the Lair. However, when devils conquer other places and cities from other planes, they are dragged into hell and become a part of Avernus. They've done this so much that now the river Styx is in the middle of the Lair, everything on the other side of it being chunks stolen from other parts of the multiverse. The Garden. The Garden is a beautiful garden. Babbling brooks of clean, pure water, trees rivaling the heights of Arborea, with fruits and flowers hanging well within reach. Wide lakes and rolling hills all occupy the garden. You don't need to worry about running out of food or water while here. This place is a safe haven in Avernus. Batazu refused to enter the garden, and violence is physically impossible here. Everyone is always happy in the garden. Eventually, one of its inhabitants will disappear, leaving no trace. Usually, it's one of the happiest individuals. You know, the ones with glazed stares lolling about. No one knows where they go or why the garden even exists. If asked about it, a Batazu will always claim ignorance to its origin or purpose. Now, there are plenty of other locations in Avernus. I'm not going to list them all because this video would be significantly longer, but I tried to include all of the well-known important locations that are present in multiple editions, or at least the locations that I found interesting. If you want more locations, I would check out the sources in my description. The 5th edition module Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus has a mediocre story in my opinion, but works really well as a setting guide that you can steal locations and NPCs from. The Plains of Law box set from 2nd edition and the Fiendish Codex 2 from 3rd edition are also wonderful resources on locations in the Nine Hells. Now, one more fact about Avernus is that it being the first layer, it leads to the second layer of Dis. Now, most sources say that Tiamat's lair is the only entrance to Dis. However, the Beator booklet in the Plains of Law box set has this map, showing that there is a portal to Dis, both in the Bronze Citadel and Darkspine. However, I can't find any descriptions of those portals anywhere in the text. They just show up on the map. So I don't know what they look like or how to use them or anything like that. Also, in 2015 on Candlekeep Forum, Ed Greenwood said that Tiamat's lair is the, quote, largest and best known way between Avernus and Dis, the route by which dumb beasts, lesser and least devils, and armies gated in from somewhere else would have to pass through, end quote. So this does confirm that there are other ways to get to Dis, just not as well known and not big entrances that armies of demons can use. If an army of demons assaulted Avernus and somehow conquered Avernus and were able to travel to the next layer, they would have to use Tiamat's lair and thus fight Tiamat, which they have learned the hard way not to mess with. Also, it has been stated that the armies of the Abyss have never made it past Avernus, and they probably never will. 5th edition has the river Styx flow through all layers of hell, unlike previous editions where it only flowed through some and skipped others. So in 5th edition, taking the river Styx would be another way to get to Dis as well. That is the end of the video on Avernus, the first layer of the 9 hells. I tried to include some descriptions of Avernus and the types of things you would find there while traveling Avernus, if you ever wanted to run a game there. Thank you for watching, I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time on Dungeons & Dragons Lore Through the Editions.